Okay, well, we live.
All right. Hey, y'all, I just want to thank you for the night for tuning in. I want to give y'all a heads up. We started off with a couple of technical difficulties. So tonight's going to be a fun show because as everybody comes in, they're going to automatically be live. So I want to tell y'all a little bit about what tonight is and what we're talking about. First and foremost, my name is Keith Strickland. I'm your host for the night. I'm the founder and CEO of Making the Transition. Making the Transition is an agency I started to help youth who are growing up in impoverished communities and growing up with disadvantages to be able to just gain the support that they need so that they can take control of their lives. We work with youth who are in the criminal justice system, youth who are growing up with all kind of different disadvantages from foster care systems, from growing up in impoverished communities or growing up around high crime communities. And I was one of those youth myself. So after serving about 5 years and being in the streets, I changed my life and decided to do something to help people who came from my same background. Growing up in my community, we didn't have nonprofits, we didn't have organizations, we didn't have a lot of support. So once God touched me and I got my life together, I decided to go back in my community and help others do the same thing. So tonight, what we're talking about is the importance of voting. We're in the state of Georgia where we had a runoff. We had a runoffs for between. We have the runoffs between. That's so funny. I'm trying not to mispronounce his name. Um,
Ossoff.
Ossoff and Purdue, and then Warnock and Kelly Loeffler. And the reason why we're pushing so hard tonight to just encourage people to get out and vote is because this vote is legendary. This vote is history in the making. This vote is going to make a big impact on what life is going to look like for people in Georgia, out of Georgia, all across the country, because this vote is going to control Congress. This vote is going to control who's going to have the voting power. Either it's going to be Republican or it's going to be Democrat. And us putting in our us coming out and turning up for the vote is going to be what actually changes DC right now. So we're in a very unique space right here in Georgia, and we just wanted to talk about why is it so important to understand that this moment is history. If you've never turned out to vote before, if you didn't come out to vote for us to have the first black president, if you didn't come out to vote for us to not have Trump in office, you got to come out and vote now. And we talking to people specifically in Georgia, but we want everybody across the country to really get this. So tonight we have a powerhouse. We have a lot of different guests. So I'm gonna let each guest give about a 1 minute introduction on who they are. And then we're just gonna get into the conversation. I'll start with Gerald Griggs because you just popped up. So Gerald, if you want to give a little background on who you are, and then we'll just pass the mic to the right.
Okay, I'm Attorney Gerald Griggs. I'm the first vice president of the Atlanta chapter of the NAACP. I'm the former third vice president of the state conference of the NAACP. I am a civil rights attorney, a social justice activist, and a native of Atlanta and who's interested in making it a better place for all people.
That was a dope intro, brother. Thank you. Um, I don't want to mispronounce your name, ma'am. If you could you go ahead and give a little background on who you are?
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm Maria Banjo, also an attorney. I am currently the field director and parliamentarian for the Fulton Democrats. In addition, I'm also the treasurer for the Young Democrats of the Black Caucus. I'm also, very heavily involved in a lot of activism movements as well as civil rights cases as well. And I also do criminal defense.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight, ma'am. And I can't wait to see what you add to it because you bring so much just knowledge and so much resource.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, brother, Mr. Gaskin.
Hey everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me into the space. Ivan Gaskin. I do affordable housing as well as I'm a performer in Atlanta. I graduated of Morehouse College, and long story short, just focused on bringing communities and individuals together across age groups, across demographics, and just getting people to focus on the fact that the word of the day is love.
All right. So we got a couple more people coming on. So I just want to let everybody jump in as they come. But the reason why I wanted to have a conversation away, I just want everybody from different walks of life and different demographics to be able to come in and speak tonight, because I feel like it's such a big deal to be able to let everybody's voices be represented. So like, I look at it like this, like with Ivan represents a younger age range than most of us, right? But Ivan comes from a very unique position. Ivan is, he's a he's coming from a position of somebody who actually owns property and has dozens of tenants all across the state. So when you look at what's going on right now in Congress, that's directly impacting him, because what a lot of people aren't seeing is that our landlords, they're going through their own struggles by being able to try to keep people in their homes. So if we don't have the right people in office and we don't have people supporting them when they have issues like this, they could lose their properties because they don't want to put people out, but they're not getting the support they need to be able to keep people in the houses, right? And then I would say me and Gerald, we share a lot of the same beliefs because we both are, well, all of us are social justice leaders, but I've worked side by side with Gerald. I've seen his passion for just disenfranchised, disadvantaged people. And I look at you, ma'am, and you come from a legal background that's extensive to be able to show like how people's justices and rights are just being taken away by a lot of this unconstitutional stuff that's going on. We have some actual politicians who will be joining us in a second. We got some other people who, Gerald Hannah's gonna be on in a minute also. So we have people who've been on the front line leading protests ever since the beginning of 2020. And I just wanted each and every person to be able to just share from their perspective, why is it so important? If you never voted in another election, why this one? Why now? So whoever wants to jump in, I don't want to just make this my view. I want to be able to share the platform. And I just want everybody to be able to represent their voice.
Yeah, and I appreciate you opening the platform. And I think we can't understate how consequential this election will be. It's about the power in the Senate. And of course, in 2008 and 2012, we all turned out to vote for Barack Obama, but we forgot to go back in the midterms and give him a Congress that will work with him on his agenda to get his agenda passed. And so a lot of people felt like even though Obama made extensive strides to make life better, he was not able to provide everything that his platform ensued and then offered. And so then we had 4 years of Donald Trump, where we saw him appeal to his base directly through initiatives that he promised during his time running for office. And now with the new administration coming in, we cannot forget that we have to make sure we provide them with a legislative branch that will be conducive to them passing the campaign promises and the platform they ran on. That's why this election is so important. And so with two Senate seats up for grabs in Georgia, there's the possibility of swinging the power in the Senate to where you can have all three branches run by one party, and it will make it a lot easier to get legislation passed, whether that's reinstallating the Voting Rights Act with all of its power, to get prison reform fully passed, to get police reform passed, and of course to deal with healthcare, to deal with immigration, and to deal with all the issues, small business loans and all kinds of things that are necessary for a fully functioning economy and a fully functioning government. And so that's why it's so important. And, we're hearing all these commercials, we're seeing the ads, we're seeing celebrities come in, but it's most important that we hear from the voters and engage the voters in a meaningful dialogue that makes them understand how important this election really is. And I think that's what's missing right now. We're trying to do a much better job of engaging voters and making it plain. I mean, it's plain that if you want to see real civil rights reform, you want to see the Justice Department actually prosecute these cases against officers who violate the public trust, you need a Congress, specifically a Senate, that will affirm the cabinet selections, will affirm any justices of the Supreme Court and federal court of this administration. So that's why it's important to get out and vote in this runoff election, starting tomorrow, all the way up until January the 5th, to make sure that there's a Congress, a majority in the Senate that will help push forward legislation of this administration. So that's why I believe it's important. I know it's a long-winded answer, but most importantly, there is a 48-48 split right now. If you get 2 Congress people, you get to 50. And then of course you have the vice president, who will be the 51st vote. So you can get things through the House, which is already run by the Democrats. And now you better get things placed up for a vote and potentially passing in the Senate.
So I want to break that down, like how I'm interpreting what you're saying, right? If we all go back to when President Obama was in office, you heard everybody say, He tried to do all these things, but he couldn't get it done because he didn't have support in Congress. He didn't have support in the Senate. He didn't have the votes to go with him. All right. So what people really have to understand is that we now have a time period where we have two people who potentially may be on the side of the common person, maybe on the side of like, the everyday individual, which we don't always have. We rarely have. But they can have the same problem as President Obama, which means everything can get bottlenecked. Like we go back right now and look at what just happened with them doing the stimulus and just the bill just going through, right? And I'm gonna tell y'all, just being honest, I was almost in tears thinking about how many people were gonna lose their homes, thinking about how many people couldn't feed themselves. I just raised almost $850,000 to hire college students to work for my company because it bothered me so much to look at what people were going through. Now, that's about 100 and some odd employees for a year. That's not a big impact on the massive scale of what's going on. But that was me trying to do everything I could see that I could do to make sure that people didn't have to commit a crime or belittle themselves to be able to feed themselves, that people didn't have to lose their homes, that people didn't have to just go without, right? But they had a package put together in DC in March, or I think even March or May, but because of the politics of it all, they wouldn't vote it through. The Republicans were holding off on pushing it through since almost at least a good 6 months, right? But that's what happens when you have people in the executive branch who make, I don't want to put it all on Republicans and I don't want to put it all on Democrats, but when you have a split of power in between the two offices, that can easily happen. So what Gerald was saying is that we have an opportunity right now to have one body of people that can actually support, come up with ideas, then make those ideas happen. So if we don't push and if we don't go hard right now, we may just have another situation where you have somebody who's they don't have the power to actually enforce anything that you're doing.
To that point, Keith, I think the biggest thing right now is that what coronavirus really did create was a vacuum. And what I mean by that is that when you start thinking about what is the difference between the super wealthy individuals as well and the individuals that are impoverished, right now what coronavirus has done is has really created a huge separation between these two groups. When you look at billionaires through this 2020 season, they have increased their net worth by billions of dollars. Now, if you take the average everyday employee, the individual who works at the airport, somebody who got a job as a janitor, somebody who works at a restaurant, the people who really need it are really a lot of times messed up in the game. And I think that if you look across the board, the things that people really care about are housing, jobs, and ultimately what does the future look like? Right now, when you look at today, millennials are right now living at home for the first time at a higher rate than they're living outside of the home. So right now, 52% of millennials are living at home with their parents in some way, shape, or form. This didn't happen during the Great Depression. This didn't happen during any other recession in the past. This didn't happen during World War II. And we're saying now, this is the first time as Americans, we're having to have conversations around, are we doing worse than our parents in aggregate, like as a whole, across the board? And I think when you start talking about who are the people that are creating the legislation around, hey, where does the stimulus check go? Or where do these stimulus funds go? Because a lot of these companies that were highly irresponsible or used the monies for stock buybacks or were able to use the money for bonuses and for things that didn't actually employ people, right? We saw what happened in October, right? People kept these jobs, what they knew that they weren't actually going to keep. And then thousands of people getting laid off across American, across Delta, across these whole industries. And a lot of these industries are not going to recover. If you look at the stock market, right, the stock market is at record highs. However, unemployment is also at record highs. So who is that really benefiting? You're looking at individuals who right now have the most money being able to multiply their money, because right now, since April or May, since April, right, this has been the fastest, longest, and highest stock bull market ever, right? And at the same time, the majority of people lost everything. Well, I don't say the majority of people lost everything, but a very, very large percentage of the population lost.
The people who were in the most vulnerable positions lost the most. And the people who were in positions to be able to capitalize off of a market that was increasing, those people just multiplied what they already had.
Right. But this is the problem, right? So people look at it and it's like, all right, so somebody lost a job, now they have to do this at 7:30. It's not just losing a job, right? Right now, people have had to figure out, how do we replace having to be in person? And that fundamentally shifts an economy. And what I mean by that is that now that people don't actually have to go back to work in these downtown settings, right? What does that do to these local economies? What does that do to travel? A lot of these tourist destinations where people were relying on, oh, hey, I do student housing, or I have a small business around a college campus, right? A lot of these vendors who support certain communities, but those communities no longer exist because people can't come together. And what I'm saying is that when you look at the transition from, hey, this is what life used to look like, and now we have to create an entirely new life, there's nobody out there right now that's focused on the individual who's really trying to get started or trying to make it. A lot of these funds are going through pipelines and funnels that are already well oiled, meaning that these are people who already have money, who already have influence, who are able to redirect large amounts of these funds to them. When you think about what does a small business owner have, if they didn't have strong credit, they didn't get any of that stimulus money. Right? PPP loans, if you're talking about small business owners that didn't have all of their books together, why? Because maybe they're struggling. They didn't get any of that business, any of that money. And I think that when you think about the people who help keep your community together, right? Does every barber and every beauty salon have all of their books tight? Are all of these mom and pop shops, these restaurants, perfectly prepared to be able to undergo an audit? Because that is essentially what was requested. And once again, I'm not trying to overstate it.
But I mean, okay, so another number to look at, I believe it was like 1.1 black-owned businesses before COVID really hit, and now we're down to like 640,000 black-owned businesses. And then when you look at our community and you look at like, okay, who creates the jobs in our community, who employs the people that live in our community, who supplies the goods and the services and the needs of the people in our community, right? Like, that's a big loss. That's not a small impact. Especially when we got areas going through gentrification that never had a grocery store before. They did not have anywhere where you can grocery shop in their community. They lost the little that they had, and they're being displaced at the same time. And they're being displaced without a functional job market. So when they get displaced, what job is going to be available for them when they get moved out further to outside the metropolitan cities that they've lived in 3 and 4 generations, right? And if you have a Congress or you have a government, I don't mean to cut you off, but if you have a government that's not focused on those people, then they're going to create laws that are beneficial to the person who was trying to take the community in the first place, who was trying to take the company and the commerce in the first place. So I'm piggybacking off what you're saying. I just, as a business owner myself, I know that we took a hit. I do know that. But I know that the person who worked for us took a bigger hit.
I think what I'm saying is that businesses are the individuals who help provide value to the community, in the sense that half of all people in America are employed by small businesses. So when you start losing small businesses, you're losing opportunities for people to feed their families. And when you boil it all the way back down to that, right, we're moving into a space where automation is going to take a much stronger hold, right? The gap is going to get extremely wide. And if nobody's paying attention to how can we make sure that people can still cross that, the American dream is under attack. And I think that when you think about especially communities of color or Black communities, just because that's who's on the phone right now, I think that when we have conversations around who are we voting for and why is it important to vote, it's important to vote because literally your life and your community depends on it.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. But I want to open up. Yes, ma'am.
So I was going to say, Gerald gave a really good comprehensive answer to this question, but I want to point out that we're at a point in a political atmosphere where Black people as a whole has the ability to flex its voting power. I think prior to 2016, campaigns, organizations can succeed without the support of Black people. I think the more that we come out and vote, and as a voting bloc, we're able to, I'm thinking, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, that's to me is why it's really important that we get out the vote, especially in minority communities, because again, if you don't have the power, no one's going to listen to you. But once we flex it, then they know, now you need to come and talk to us. Now you need to hear us. Now you need us at the table, not just there, but listen and actually give us an opportunity.
So I want to piggyback on what you're saying, right? This is something that's just on me, and I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna try to keep it as politically correct as possible. I don't want to poke anything. I look at the city of Atlanta, and I look at. Are you familiar with Aaron Turpo? He was the city manager from Maynard Jackson's time period. So Aaron Turpo and Maynard. Yeah, Aaron Turpo and Maynard Jackson were best friends. When Maynard Jackson came into office, he had this belief that it was going to be difficult to keep Black power inside of the executive office of the city. So he created a position to where our mayors will have to answer to somebody. So even if he did lose, like say we lost Black leadership in the in that executive branch of office, then we would still have somebody who could kind of oversee and look out and protect that community. So Aaron Turpo was like that gatekeeper, right? Aaron Turpo was all the way from Maynard Jackson all the way up to Kasim Reed, if I'm correct. I believe so. I believe he retired out right when Kasim Reed came into office. But if you look, gentrification really snowballed after he came out of office. So I'm listening to what you said about us voting as a voting block, but the difference between that and now is that we actually make sure that people hear our voice and that people give us a seat at the table, right? I look at in Atlanta, even though we control the numbers for a lot of time, a long time period, we didn't control the economic power. We didn't control the complementary pieces that went along with these offices, right? And we lost a Black city under Black leadership because we, even though we had the numbers, we didn't have the voice at the table. Like you had other people, like some of these large development groups that were coming in that were not Black owned and had no Black interests, and they came in and they had so much capital and so much they could put, offer to the city to where they were able to take communities right from up under us. Because even though we had the numbers, we just didn't have influence. And I think that that's what you're saying is the difference now, that we can actually create a body of influence. So it's like people aren't just coming to us to get our numbers, but they have to hear us and they have to listen to us and they have to work with us.
Absolutely. But I also think, we're talking about two separate things. It's one, on the macro level, the majority and the minorities as a whole, Black people, people of color. And then we're talking about inequalities within the Black community. That's like a class issue, So I do think city of Atlanta, like a lot of places has a class issue. A lot of folks making these decisions don't know what it's like in the project. They don't know what it is like to live off food stamps. Don't understand why someone would steal some cheese. So I think it's also important to acknowledge the class issue that we really do have in Atlanta, in the Black community, I think.
I definitely agree with that. Definitely.
And can we kind of pull back from Atlanta, because it's a great example for 40 years of leadership. But let's be realistic. You got Atlanta and you got Metro Atlanta. I love the city. I'm from the city, but it's only 440,000 people. Metro area is 6 million. And so even though we're probably going to lose the city, we're going to gain the metro and gain the state. So the problems that we saw in the city under 40 years of Black leadership was just like Maria said, you had classism going on. So you had a group of elite Black people that were running the city, but were not thinking about the rest of the Black people that were being pushed out. And so I would say under Kasim's leadership and now under the current mayor's leadership, we just forgot and abdicated to a whole lot of Black people's problems. But I think in the state of Georgia, where you have 2.2 million African-American registered voters, you have a block and now a historical context to look at to how not to do it and how to make sure you provide for your base. Because in the last 4 years, we've had a civics lesson that politicians can directly provide for their base. Mm-hmm. So we have to remind these politicians over and over again, you need to provide for your base. And I think we can do that more effectively at the state level than we've been able to do at the city level. We were just happy with Black leadership. No longer are we just happy with Black leadership. We want Black tangibles and Black deliverables from a government that's beholden to us and our voting power. Because let's keep it real. The last, two presidencies have been decided because of Black people. And this third one was clearly because of Black people. So if you look at Barack Obama, he was elected by a coalition led by Black people. And then President Trump was elected because Black people took the day off. And now President Biden has been elected because Black people turned out in record numbers. So now we have to make sure that on the state level in this state, which we were the main reason why you saw what happened in November, we demand deliverables day one of the administration, right after we finish voting in the runoffs.
So
Absolutely. Sorry, I was going to say that, I think a lot of us don't feel comfortable with true accountability. And I think that we need to feel comfortable holding elected officials accountable to what they said, what they've promised, what they campaigned on. Otherwise, they are worse than folks that don't look like us. That's my feeling right there.
And I think a lot of that does tie back to how do we make sure that we see ourselves in a certain light. And what I mean by that is, as a West Side resident, you know what I'm saying, as an individual who lives over here, right? The West Side of Atlanta looks very differently than Buckhead, right? It's not because we live in separate cities. It's not because the city services aren't available. It's literally because a lot of people don't know that you can call 311, have trash picked up, have certain things handled, have a lot of different services provided. And I think when it comes to having a conversation around how ultimately our community serve, we don't necessarily do a phenomenal job of making sure those who do know educate those that don't and say, hey, no, actually, as a citizen who pays taxes here, you're entitled to some of these rights. You're entitled to some of these services. You do have the right to demand this of the people who are serving you.
So I want to say this, right? I respect that, and I challenge it. And I want to throw Gerald back into this conversation because I do know that you're a West Side resident, but you're a West Side resident of the new West Side of Atlanta, right? Like, we've been West Side residents for decades, right? That's not anywhere near what the West Side of Atlanta was treated like for decades. Like, I was patted down from walking to my elementary and my middle school. I was patted down by Red Dog and searched by Drug Dog every single day, every day, right? We had kids that got hit by MARTA buses and by school buses because there was no stop lights, there was no crosswalks, it was no stop signs, there was no sidewalks, none of these things, right? We could call every single day. You get, but then when you had a white resident who would call on your behalf because they're tired of seeing this child get hit by a bus in front of them, then something would be done about it. So the truth of it is that a lot of times people did reach out. It just was nowhere close to the same concern for that population as it was for population on the north side or population on the east side. So
and that's a good point. But what I'm saying is that why is that? Why is it that But I mean, I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is that if you look at it,
right, if you got a population of people that can't afford an attorney, I mean, they can't fight back. If they don't have
that's what I'm saying.
To make noise, that means that no matter what you do to them, it's done in the dark.
So, right, and that's what I'm talking about in terms of accountability.
Yeah, I'll give you an example.
Go ahead.
My grandmother owned a house on Lyndhurst, and later on in life, I think, she passed away about 6 years ago. So about 9 years ago, she called me. Actually, my dad called me and then put grandma on the phone and said she had a $3,000 water bill. And so, we reached out to the city council. We reached out to the water department. They didn't do anything until I showed up. And because I am her grandson and I happen to be an attorney, the $3,000 water bill magically went away. Now, she had been living in that community for 40 years. And so now the community is starting to look different. They put street lights all down Lyndhurst and all everywhere because the gentrification is coming. But, as somebody that's born and raised Southwest Atlanta, it wasn't until others started moving in that the politicians started to respond.
And it wasn't a lack of us communicating with them. And I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want to be very clear. It wasn't a lack of us reaching out to them. It wasn't a lack of us trying to say, hey, we need this. Like, the city of Atlanta, people used to be downtown flooding City Hall. But after a decade of that not doing anything, people just stopped.
Right. But what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, right now, all we can do is going forward, make sure people are aware of what services are provided to them by the city.
So maybe a renewed interest.
Yeah, because what that ultimately is saying is that could dissuade somebody from voting. No, because you live in Southwest, they're not going to care regardless. And I don't accept that. And I understand that that's been the case in the past. I understand. That's
not what we're saying. What we're saying.
Let me finish what I'm. Go ahead.
What we're saying is, from this day forward, if county, a county commissioner or a city councilman doesn't respond, then we pull up and we vote them out. And so there's no reason for what's happening right now in Buckhead to be getting more attention because a 7-year-old was shot in the back of the head when Sequoia Turner was shot in the back of the head right after Ray Shard. But we got council people now calling out the mayor because it's a sexy issue because it happened in Buckhead. That's been happening in the city of Atlanta for years. We've had a gun violence issue in the city of Atlanta for years. And it's not just a gun violence issue from citizens on citizens. There's a gun violence issue with police officers. And the reason why that 7-year-old was allowed to be killed, to be shot in Buckhead is because of the blue flu after the protesters had called the police out for lack of police accountability and they started removing services. So what I'm saying is we got to have politicians that have the courage to do what's right, whether it's in Buckhead or Bankhead, and it shouldn't matter. And we got to call something else out. Bankhead, it's not West Midtown, it's Bankhead. Why are we changing the names of communities so we can displace citizens? These are things.
Wait, is West Midtown Bankhead?
Yes, West Midtown.
They're calling that West Midtown? I'm sorry. I know Bankhead. I've never. Okay.
So let's back up. And let's back up, right? Bankhead used to have a bridge. The bridge is the Black community's entry into downtown Atlanta. The bridge used to come right over Marietta Street. White people protested because they didn't want Black people to have access to downtown. The city of Atlanta cuts off the bridge so that now all of these Black businesses that had their own Black downtown could be starved out. These businesses, which was once a thriving community because it led into downtown, becomes hood, becomes project. And then once it becomes dilapidated and it runs down, and then white people say, wow, you know what? This can have some value to it. Then they start to raise the property taxes. You got families like Joe and Son that own 5 blocks of that area. They push them out of that area. They get outside investors to come in, close down the only grocery store they have, close down their fresh food places. And now guess what's happening? The bridge is about to open back up now that it's no longer a Black community. So when we talk about Black people not protesting, when we talk about Black people not standing up, for decades, the people pushed to get that bridge reopened. For decades. And I'm saying that because it's not the lack of, so I come from this voting push from a whole different perspective. I've never in my life had the right to vote. Never. I became a convicted felon at 16 years old, right? I've never had the right to vote. But what I've always had is the right to go to somebody's office and raise hell. I've always had that right. So you vote them in and I'll be at their door, right? That's the way I've always looked at it. So when I talk about what do we need to do, what is this? What is that? That's the point of view I take in. I know that you don't care about us because you care about what gives you the biggest economic push. It's not usually our community. So we're usually not the person you're thinking about in the meeting. You're thinking about new development. You're thinking about how to stimulate the economy. You're thinking about how to bring in more outside dollars. When you got a population that lives very close to scarcity, they're not going to be the people who you're going to pull the highest amount of investment out of, right? They don't have the disposable income. They don't have the capital. They don't even have, they don't have stock market investments. They don't have portfolios. So when we go to these offices, they're not the person who's the talking points. The people who are the talking points are the people who you want to bring dollars into this community from outside of it. So you're going to look at how do you push them out and how do you make it attractive to these outside people? And that's usually what happens in our offices. Go ahead, Ivan.
To that point, I think when I speak about making sure that people are aware of what they have the opportunity to do, when you look at what was done with the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, right? They had the West Side Works program. They have other work programs that have been rolled out. And a lot of times individuals are just not aware of some of the opportunities that are here today. Now, once again, we can't talk about what was there 20 years ago. I'm saying right now, today, they have the COVID relief program. And as an individual who works firsthand with individuals who are on the borderline of being evicted, provided they don't get a stimulus check on the first, I know that a lot of them just are not aware of some of the opportunities they have to change their circumstances based on services that are being rolled out because it's not being communicated.
So even with the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, most people don't realize they put extra dirt so that it does not get flooded, okay? And The areas where the Black folks are got water coming into their home, coming into their churches. So even today, it's very strategic, you know, like all of this. I mean, and so I think, I don't know.
I'm talking about jobs and job programs. West Side Work job program. I understand that part. I'm just saying that right now there are people that are getting ready to get evicted, and there's dollars out there for them, and that's not being communicated.
And I understand what you're saying, but even with the bins and the tax deferment that's been given to that particular entity, which would feed back into that community, which would create a thriving community in English Avenue and Vine City. You know, I know they need jobs, and of course we want to provide that, but if you take away the engine that drives the economy in that community and then say, okay, well, we're going to give you job training, but we moving you out and we raising the tax base because the biggest driver of tax revenue is the stadium, which, oh, by the way, cut off the West Side from downtown. It was placed there by took away two historical churches, one which was the birthplace of the HBCUs that sit over there. So again, it's a historical context that we have to look at all of this and the engineering of the city, you know, that has been away from its historical roots and the Black people that live there.
I want to say something real quickly, but let's also look at this, right? Before we even got the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, let's talk about the piping in Vine City to where all these people that owned their properties lost their properties because the city wouldn't even replace piping. Let's also talk about you had over 110,000 children in APS going to school in APS. It went down to 50,000 children. So we talking about we'll give you enough to survive when people don't deserve to survive. People deserve to thrive, and it's not okay to tell people take these crumbs. And if you don't take these crumbs, then you're not taking advantage of what's being offered. But I do want to introduce Hannah also because she just joined. We can table this and come back to it. But Hannah just came from off the front lines, so I just want Hannah to be able to introduce herself, give her perspective on why she feel like it's important to vote, and we can get back into the conversation.
Yeah, jumped in at a really passionate moment. I mean, this is real stuff. This is real. This is impacting real people. And so thank you to all of you for using your voices to fight for change. Thank you to Keith for the invitation and all the great work he does. This is just an awesome platform that you've shared with the community. So thank you. I do see some people on here. I see my brother Gerald Griggs in the house. We were actually just texting today about some cases that he was taking on pro bono to help protesters from the summer. So I just want to say thank you for all the work you do. And to the other queens and kings on this call, much love, and I salute each of you. My name is Hannah Joy Gebrselassie. I'm a journalist, community advocate, and motivational speaker. And to Keith's point, we've been out here canvassing. We've been out here doing voter registration drives before the deadline. We've been out here protesting. We've been out here doing anything we can to fight for change. And we know that a big part of seeing that change will be this important historic runoff election. So we're trying to encourage as many people as possible. We've touched base with thousands of people, and we're not going to stop. We have exactly 2 weeks from today until election day, which means we have 2 weeks left to do everything we can to make sure our people show up, to make sure we leave it all on the table so that we can see the reality that we're all speaking of. A lot of these things that you're talking about right now. So thank you for welcoming me to this conversation. I'm definitely happy to speak more about all of that, but want to pass it back to you, Keith.
So I was just going to say, I think we're all on the same page. I think we're all thinking like short-term versus long-term. And I don't think you can think about them separately. People do need jobs now, but as we know from the other side, they think 10 years in 10-year block, 20 years block to achieve their goals. And I think it's important to talk about infrastructure, talk about laws that are hindrance for long-term growth in the community. So I do think that we're all on the same page. It's just that we're talking about long-term versus short-term. I could be wrong. Let me know.
No, so one thing I want to say is I don't disagree with what Ivan was saying just because I'm not as supportive from that perspective, right? I do get what you're saying. If you're in a certain position and you need resources to be able to take care of your family today, that's important. But I do not want to call a person a champion because you took $1,000 away from the community and came back and gave it 50. right? And that's exactly what's going on. Like when you look at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, you look at a lot of the growth that happened that bettered the city of Atlanta, it ruined the lives of a lot of Black people who built the city of Atlanta. And for a person who's been in the city of Atlanta for a long time, we literally, like what he was talking about the $3,000 water bill that happened 9 years ago, man, when that came through Atlanta, when they separated the waste and the water and the sanitation, man, thousands and thousands of people were losing their houses left and right, right? That started in the early 2000s. And by 2007, 2008, they had taken whole communities of Black people's homes, right? Because people didn't know that the bills got separated. So it just ran up and then it was penalized. And then by the time anybody even knew, people who were living on a fixed income, there was no way they could pay that back. And that was the beginning of how you saw gentrification sweep through with this new tax that nobody even knew about. So when you see a lot of people who aren't trusting in these opportunities that are being given out, for one, those opportunities are just enough for them to be able to survive in the same level of hand to mouth, right? And for two, it's coming from the same people that took advantage of them, and they watched their family lose those properties. They watched their family be whole lives flip upside down. So to me, the reason why it's so important that we vote, it's so important that we be active, is that we got to make sure that people never get in office again that see people and think about them that way. Never. Like it's a lot of people who moved to the city of Atlanta or live in the metro, and they weren't really here to be able to see how horrible this was. I mean, horrible. I remember getting pulled over. I had crack on me. I got pulled over by a police officer. Had a gun and had crack on me. And I got pulled over in front of him where it used to be some projects, but they had closed down the projects. He just assumed I was from that area. I think I'm finna get locked up. So whatever question he asked me, I just say yes to. So he like, you come from over here? I'm like, yeah. He was like, you know what, man? I feel so bad about what happened to y'all. Keep the crack. I ain't even gonna take it from you. Just be safe out here. And this is coming from a police officer who's supposed to be keeping the street safe. But he was like, they're worse criminals than y'all are. Because he watched hundreds of thousands of people be kicked out on the streets like that. And this was all done on the politicians we voted in. So when I say why is it so important to vote, that's why. Because if you ever get a body of people again that just see economic development and don't see people, like, I'm sorry, keep it all the way real. Shirley Franklin is on the board for the people that redeveloped Little Vietnam. What was the real name of Little Vietnam?
Lake Meadows.
East Lake.
How in the world was the mayor who granted the development on the board of the company that took the properties and redeveloped them? How is that possible? And I said I wanted to keep this, politically correct. But if we're gonna talk about it, let's talk about it.
I respect Mayor Franklin. She's a good friend of mine. So I understand that that view. And I think that it goes deeper than that. I think that, the last two administrations have just not been the best for the city. They've been the best for big business, but not for the city. And so I think that underscores why it's so important to vote in this upcoming runoff, because we need elected officials at the federal level where the federal dollars are coming into these community-based programs to redevelop the community with an eye towards redeveloping for the neighborhoods that are already there and not for redevelopment for new people to come in. It's still enough time on the west side to protect the integrity of that community for the people that live there. Other places in Atlanta is pretty much over. So, I've reshaped my focus to focusing on the metro because in the city, I just don't know if there are enough politicians that care enough about the people to make sure that they protect them. That's why we have the Gulch development that's about to happen right in the Gulch where there's no affordable housing. So I just think that we have to, as voters, be very conscious of the people's platform, and the day one of their administration, hold their feet to the fire. The same way we were marching in the streets for against Trump, and we were marching in the streets against police brutality, is the same energy we got to keep for this next incoming administration. It's not a Republican thing. It's not a Democratic thing. It's a people thing, and they got to provide for the people.
And not just hold their feet to the fire for what they said to get them in office, hold their feet to the fire for the new development that we have as they're in office. Because I'm like, even with Shirley Franklin, I'm just speaking on a truth, but I don't know her reality. I don't know, what led that decision. I just know that wasn't good for that population of people in any kind of way. So you have new developments that happen in real time, and you got to communicate that in real time and protect yourself, your community, your family in real time. And that has not been happening in the Black community. We don't do a good job at that. We don't stay engaged enough to be able to have our finger on the pulse in a way that has equity to it. Like, we may complain, but by the time we complain, stuff already in motion. Like the goats. We'll start complaining when the development comes. Go ahead, Ivan.
No, I think basically what I'm saying is, yes, it's very important to vote. However, to be able to hold our elected officials accountable, we have to do a better job as individuals who hold on to positions where, hey, we're maybe in the know, or maybe more in the know than other people. I remember when basically the stimulus first rolled out, a lot of people didn't know how to fill out their unemployment. A lot of people didn't know how to make sure that they were in a position to be able to get these stimulus checks. A lot of people don't know right now. There are going to be plenty of people who get evicted on the 1st of this month because they were not able to apply. They didn't know, they didn't have birth certificates. They didn't have documentation in place. And there was nobody there to hold their hand or to be able to say, hey, look, these are the things you need to make sure that you have lined up. And I'm saying that in terms of the class divide that we talk about in Atlanta, Black people who have or are in the know and Black people who do not, I think that at the same time, it is very important to hold politicians accountable. If people don't know what's going on, then there's no way that you can expect people to have a certain level of attention to detail or reaction. And that's genuinely my point.
So I want to get feedback from the Queens, but I do want to say this. I apologize because I think this was on me. I didn't want to make this this conversation about Atlanta. I just wanted to use Atlanta as the example because we did not do it the right way. When we had the opportunity to, we did not use our power the right way. I just don't want to see that happen to other disadvantaged communities or other minorities all over the country.
I think so. I hear a few themes that I'm loving, and I think 3 of those things are awareness, action, and accountability, right? You speak about the awareness. How can people access these opportunities if people aren't aware about it, right? So we have to make sure as community members, we are educating our brothers and sisters and making sure people are informed. You have the action part, right? We're trying to take action right now. We're trying to get to the polls. Most of us on here, hopefully all of us, have already voted. What are we doing to make sure other people vote, right? Are we texting 3 friends a day? Are we posting on social media? Are we donating, even if it's $5 or $10 to the campaigns, because that will go a long way? Are we doing anything we can to get more people to the polls? Plug in with an organization, volunteer. We already voted. We got that part out the way, but what are we going to do to make sure our vote is stronger come January 5th? And then that third portion, that third theme is the accountability, right? Okay, we're voting, right? We have historic Senate runoff election. So much is at stake. It does not stop on January 5th, right? We have to hold them accountable to not just what they're saying, but also what our community needs are. We need to be having roundtable conversations with them. We need to be having Zoom meetings with them. We need to be in their faces beyond the election. Don't just show up to our communities when you're running for office. Show up when you are in office. Hear what the people are saying. See what's going on. Feel it with your own hands. Because there's so much going on, and you looking through a screen or talking to one representative that sits in office from the community is not an accurate representation of what's going on. We all know that because we're out there and we see it. And so, and this is me talking, seeing so much even today while I was canvassing, just processing so much, seeing how much help our communities need. So I really think the awareness, action, and accountability are 3 themes we all need to really focus in on and do a lot more of.
So one thing I would say about accountability that I just feel like our community is not having this conversation is accountability on what your track record has already shown also. Like the damage you've done, be very vocal about how you plan on undoing that damage. Be very vocal about the fact that you know that you did damage. Because we're voting for people who all hurt our community in some kind of way. Well, I'm gonna say that on a executive level. I'm not talking about Warnock. I'm not talking about like in our local elections, but I'm talking more like our presidential election. If we were forced to vote in people and support people and rally behind people who dramatically hurt our communities, right? And if we don't have those conversations, what are we doing with our power? We don't say, we need to start off with a sense of accountability, not, accountability once you get in office, but accountability before we even get you off out. These are the conversations that I wish our community can have more of, because there's a lot of broken families. Truth be told, man, I do understand that we got to take advantage of the opportunities there for us, but I could give a damn less about an opportunity if we don't have equity, and you took our equity to give us these penny opportunities. And that's not okay. You know what I'm saying? Like West Side Works. You took the West Side to give us a job while you remake the West Side for you. And I get it. But I'm just saying this. That's not okay. That's like a person coming in your house and robbing you and telling you, I'm gonna pay you to clean up after I bust the window. You know what I'm saying? This is my house. Like, my family built this house. My family bought this house. But we lost it. And now we get an opportunity to help you while you're taking it. That, to me, man, we just gotta have a much more realistic, it's a more realistic view of what we deserve as a people, what it's gonna take to get us to that point where our children have the equity that we deserve to have. And you know what I'm saying? What we gotta do to get us to that place.
Yeah, and I think that we have to be students of the past, but also reinvent the future. And I think that in Atlanta, we are particularly situated, even though the city is pretty much gone, Metro Atlanta and the state are not. And so what we have to do is to make sure that our elected officials, and of course, the ones that are on the ballot, did not actively participate in what happened in Atlanta. So he's starting off from a clean slate there. But we have to realize that certain buzzwords have to cease. When we're talking about our community and we're talking about working class people, let's put a name on that. Black people are working class people, but Black people are our people. Black people need more investment and more contractors, contracting jobs with government to get that stimulus that's coming down. Black people need the land grants that have been given and all these things that Congress can do. So our conversation with our elected officials, and I'll give one a shout out because many people say all you do is bash elected officials, but I give one a shout out. In the 3 weeks that he's been in Congress, he's been updating people daily on what he's doing, and that's Kwanzaa Hall. He's been in office 3 weeks, and he's dropped 7 bills and told the community exactly what's going on. So that's the level of transparency and accountability we want out of these 2 senators, because again, in the Senate, there's only 100 members of the Senate. And so we have an opportunity to send 2. And so we need that level of accountability when we're having these discussions on healthcare. We're having these discussions on economic development. We're having these discussions, on reinvestment in communities. And we need to be very specific. It's okay, Black people, to finally say, for once, we need reinvestment in the Black community, period.
Especially now more than ever.
All boats aren't rising when we give to all boats. So at some point, we need to focus on this boat and let that boat rise. And so we can get the 401 years of equity we've been demanding given to us so that we can better our own communities.
Do y'all know one major Black city that is not losing its communities right now? Literally.
It's not one. It's not one. It's not one.
But I know one major Black metropolitan area. We gotta stop focusing on the cities, because at this point, the gentrification has already occurred. It's just like Maria said, they had a 20-year plan and we were late to the 20-year plan. But we can now have a 20-year plan for metropolitan areas and states. If we follow a reverse Southern strategy, there are enough African Americans and minorities to take the entire South, just like we took Georgia. So we got to think 20 years ahead instead of 20 years back.
The reason why I want to focus on that is not because I want us to stay stuck in that space. It's so that we can have people who can stop paying $1,500, $1,800 a month to rent an apartment in a city that's already been taken from you, and you can go get equity. You can go and get land. One of my cousins just bought 11 acres of land in DeKalb County for $150,000 inside of DeKalb County.
Well, yeah, but that's a conversation that we have. Not saying, okay, in Atlanta we still have this situation. It's saying, no, in Henry County, in Clayton County, which are now majority Black, in Cobb County, in Douglas County, in Rockdale County, in Newton County, all these counties, there's an opportunity to redevelop community in a way that speaks to inclusivity and that speaks to a change in governance, and not just focus on the last 40 years of what happened in Atlanta. Let's just be real. Maynard had a great idea. He did a great job, but then there were others that came in and decided, you know what, we're just gonna talk to the talented 10. We're not gonna think about everybody else, and we got what we got. But right now, there's an opportunity in all these metropolitan counties and some of the southern counties to do the exact opposite and run county government instead of city government.
So what I was gonna say, what like Ivan, what you mentioned about awareness, I think that take it a step further, not only awareness, but actual access. When these developers are coming to different neighborhoods, a lot of us don't have the time to spend 3 hours in some meeting in some random place. I think one thing that this year has taught us is that we can accomplish a lot remotely. So I'm hopeful that we can continue these Zoom calls for these various neighborhood meetings, whether it's up at the Capitol, you know. I mean, I'm a lawyer, Gerald's a lawyer, you know, and despite that, it's still hard to navigate government. It's still hard to navigate these neighborhood associations, these licensing. It's set up for a reason like that. So I think instead of just saying we need to get more involved, is understanding what structures are in place that are preventing us from engaging. And so hopefully we're able to provide more access and transparency with the use of Zoom.
Yeah, I agree. If we don't keep the conversation going, it's going to die. Down to our last 5 minutes, y'all. I want to thank everybody for coming on. I'm extremely passionate on this space because, I mean, I literally watched people that look like me lose everything they had as these communities have turned. And I refuse, like, over my dead body will I watch our kids continue to keep taking losses while we're working so hard to try to build for them. Like, I refuse, right? I agree with what Gerald said. We got to shift our focus. I agree with what everybody said. But I want to give everybody a minute to have one closing statement. So whatever order y'all would like to go in, I would say ladies first, and then gentlemen, y'all can close it out.
I'll just go. I think that not only with the Senate races, we also have Daniel Blackman running for Public Service Commission, and knowing that Black people and folks who are people of color bear the brunt of the energy burden, and we have major issues with bills and such. That's a very, very, very important race. Currently, it's held by one party, all 6 positions, and this is an opportunity to provide any kind of diversity, whether by party or race, on that commission. So I do urge people to also don't forget Daniel Blackman. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us again, Keith. Just truly honored to be in this fight with you and every single person on this call tonight. I just want to say, you know, everybody, all of the small steps we take do work together to make that collective change. It's not going to happen with one person. It's not going to happen with one team. It's happening with a bunch of teams coming together. So just understand that the role you play is going to be specific to you and what you can do with your skill sets and your gifts, but that is going to come together and meet everybody else to make that difference. So don't stop pushing, don't stop working to make a difference. We need all the energy right now. And I beg you, I rarely ever use the word beg, but I am begging you to please do everything you can to finish these last 2 weeks strong. So many of our brothers and sisters have still not voted. Please make sure you're texting somebody, calling somebody, posting on social media, donating, volunteering, whatever you can do, because this is going to determine a lot that happens in the next few years and beyond that. So thank you again for having us, sending much love to everybody watching tonight.
Definitely appreciate the space. Want to say thank you to you again, Keith, and everybody else that tuned in as well as was on the panel. I think that when it comes to looking at everything that we do as something that ultimately affects our whole, I think that everybody doing all that they can do is 100%, just to echo the previous statements, all we have. I think that there are moments that really decide how history is remembered. And just to really emphasize it, basically right now, when you talk about creating your life, creating your future, creating your community, how you vote and how you get people around you to come out and vote is actually going to have real consequences. A lot of times you hear these conversations around, well, it doesn't make a difference. And I think a lot of people saw that in this election, you do make a difference. Your voice is important. And that's why it's important to speak up. I think it's very important to make sure that everybody around you is also taking whatever steps you have, whether that's you outside with a sign, whether that's you on Instagram, whether that's you talking to people in your household, your friends, or even making sure that you're doing all that you can. Because at the end of the day, I mean, we in this together. So.
And I thank you, Keith, for opening up the space to have this conversation. I think that, more individuals need to have this political discourse because, in the marketplace of ideas, that's how we get to the change we want to see. So, we may disagree on the path, but we all understand the path is leading towards what we are looking for. So, my message to people is just like Hannah, it's just like Ivan, it's just like Maria, just like Keith. We got to get out. We got to make sure that we vote in this election. I applaud you guys for November. November, y'all shocked the world. But we also got to do it again because they have reloaded and we have to reload. And I trust in the power of my brothers and sisters. And that's not just Black people. That's people of good conscience. That's people that want to see America move forward in a progressive manner for all people. So it's time. It's time to call 10 of your friends that are registered voters and make sure they get out and vote their conscience in this election. And now I'm going to speak as Gerald Griggs. It's not Gerald Griggs, NAACP or anything else. This is Gerald Griggs. Y'all need to get out and vote your ass off and make sure you get Raphael Warnock in the Senate. So John and Raphael need to go to the Senate so we can change America. We need progressive senators from this state to make this state great so that we can have a state that is a symbol to the rest of the South. Because I gave y'all the new political model. It's the reverse Southern strategy. If we can change Georgia, we can change Alabama and South Carolina and Florida and Mississippi and Louisiana, because Georgia was one of the first architects of the Confederacy. And so if we can change this old Confederate slave state, we can make the entire nation be what it says on paper. So I'm asking you, as humbly as I know how, a son of Georgia, a son of this red clay from Southwest Atlanta, it's time to make the ground shake again. It's time to change politics. It's time to send people to the Senate that will return your phone call, that will open up their office and have a conversation with you, that will actually have a town hall, that are actually from the state of Georgia, unlike Illinois' Kelly and the guy from Sea Island. We need Georgia senators that speak Georgian, that understand the needs of rural Georgia, that understand the needs of suburban Georgia, that understand the needs of urban Georgia, and that will do the will of Georgia. And so go vote Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff today and take 10 people with you tomorrow.
Woo. I want to close out just by saying thank you to everybody. And the only thing I want to say is, if you remember how I felt when Trayvon Martin died, and then when you saw the way that was handled, if you felt bad about that, then understand that the people who we vote for, the people that make the laws that govern, do these things happen, and how they'll be handled. So every time you've seen something be fumbled, every time you've seen people of color or people with disadvantages been treated like they're not human, that's what you're voting about. That's what your vote controls. It's the people that write the laws. It's the people who say, yes, we will indict. It's the people who say who's going to get support. It's the people who say, what is your human life actually worth? So if you feel like that matters, you vote. If you don't think it matters, then don't vote. But don't have anything to say if there's somebody in your household that gets killed, and there's somebody who in your household nobody cares about. So thank y'all for coming out tonight. Thank y'all for just sharing so much wisdom and passion. And I pray and hope that somebody decided that they're going to make their life count, their vote count, and that they're going to be engaged after this. All right, y'all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.